Hey friends, what's up? Welcome back to Babel on Talmud. Today we are studying Daf Kuf Chaf Gimel, Daf 123 of Masechta Shabbos. It's a great daf, friends. Very good daf. It's a little big, but it's good. What do you want me to tell you? This is what I'll tell you. Let's do an overview. So first we start by talking about, we basically continue for a little bit our discussion yesterday about moving a kli shemlachto le'isr le'tzorech gufo. So we're going to continue that for a little bit. Then we're going to talk about pulling like figs and pitas out of like straw and coals. What are the muktza / tiltal implications of that? Can you move a broken needle on Shabbos? What do you guys think? I don't know. Well, I do know. Setting baby bones. Can you set baby bones on Shabbos? Like when a little guy is born, apparently, I guess the bones sometimes are a little bit kind of wobbly, so you got to put them in place, I guess. Can you do that on Shabbos, or do you got to let the guy be a little wobbly until Shabbos is over? What do you guys think? You guys think it's machlokas? Me too. And then at the end we talk a little bit about the history of muktza. I guess you can call it that. It's a little bit interesting. Friends, let's do it. We're going to start on Daf Kuf Chaf Gimel, Amud Aleph, of course. Second line of the Gemara, Eisve Abai l'Rabba. What did Rabba say? Who remembers? Rabba said that if you have a kli shemlachto le'isr, such as the hammer of a blacksmith, okay? Of course, the hammer of a blacksmith is used for, in his blacksmith shop, and that would be malacha, that would not be allowed on Shabbos. Now, but what if you want to use the hammer, the tzorech gufo, i.e., you want to take advantage, or you want to use this hammer, but instead of using it for blacksmith, you'll use it to open a nut. Is that allowed? So according to Rabba, yeah, it is allowed. Rav Yehuda, of course, said it's not allowed. But Rabba said that's fine. The tzorech gufo, to use its body, to use it in order to do something that you're allowed to do on Shabbos, such as open a nut, so you can eat it, that would be acceptable. Eisve Abai l'Rabba. Abai asks a kasha on his Rebbe Rabba, which is interesting because Rabba had asked a kasha on his Rebbe Rav Yehuda, and now Abaye is asking a kasha on his Rebbe Rabba. Okay, meaning Abaye's Rebbe was Rabba, Rabba's Rebbe was Rav Yehuda. They were all Rosh Yeshiva in the illustrious yeshiva of Pumbedisa. I believe that Rav Yehuda founded the yeshiva. I believe he was the first Rosh Yeshiva. Rabba was the second. Rav Yosef was the third. Of course, as we know from Daf Samach Daled of Masechta Brachos, and Abaye was the fourth. Rava then, I believe, was the Rosh Yeshiva after Abaye. I'm not sure if he was the Rosh Yeshiva in the city of Pumbedisa, or if the yeshiva moved over to Machoza, where Rava was. But in any event, Rava kind of took over after Abaye. Friends, Abaye asks a kasha to Rabba. He says, Medocha, when it comes to a mortar, right? So you take a mortar and a pestle, and you grind stuff up in a mortar using a pestle. If the mortar has garlic in it, well, then you can move it because there's garlic in it. However, if there is no garlic in it, you may not move the mortar. The question is, why not? Maybe I could take this mortar and I can sit on it, right? I can use it l'tzorech gufo. Why is the brisa saying full stop that you're never allowed to move a mortar that is empty, that doesn't have garlic in it, that's empty? Why can't I use it l'tzorech gufo? The fact that we're saying that you're not allowed to move this mortar, doesn't that apply not like Rabbah? Doesn't that apply that you would not be able to move this mortar even l'tzorech gufo? So Amalei, so Rabbah responds to Abaye, Hamani Reb Nechemyahi. Whose opinion is this that says that you can never move a mortar that's empty? It's Reb Nechemya's opinion. The Amar, Ein kli nital ela l'tzorech tashmisho. The Reb Nechemya says that a kli is only able to be moved for its specific use. That's it. If you have a fork, you can use a fork for eating. You can't use a fork for back scratching, right? The things may only be used for their their specific use on Shabbos. Therefore, when it comes to a mortar, its specific use is for pounding stuff in it, such as garlic, whatever it might be. But pounding stuff on Shabbos is not allowed, and therefore the only thing that you would theoretically be able to move this mortar for would be for pounding, but pounding and grinding is not allowed on Shabbos. Therefore, effectively you can't move this mortar at all. But says Rabbah, that's just Rabbi Nechemiah's opinion. There are other opinions when it comes to muktza, and Rabbah is arguing that those opinions would say that you would be allowed to move kli shemalachto le'iser l'tzorech gufo. Fine. Eisvei, Abaye is not done. He asks another question. Vishavin, skip the parentheses. Vishavin, she'im katzav olav basar she'asu l'taltala. That both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that if you've used this pestle to cut meat on it, you are no longer allowed to move it. So, what's this talking about? First of all, I don't know why you would be cutting meat on a pestle. When I think of a pestle, I think of like a small little pounding thing that you pound things in a mortar with. But I don't know. They're talking about it's Yom Tif, and the question is, can I cut meat on my pestle? So Beis Shammai says no, you may not. Beis Hillel says yes, you can. However, the only reason that Beis Hillel says that you'd be allowed to cut meat on this pestle is because it's because of Simchas Yom Tif. It's Yom Tif. You want to be happy. V'samachta b'chagecha. You have basar v'yayin. Right? Ain't simcha ela b'basar v'yayin. Very nice. So to have simcha, you have to have meat. You have to have wine. So therefore, Beis Hillel says that in the interest of v'samachta b'chagecha, of Simchas Yom Tif, you can cut meat on this pestle. However, once you are done, once you have cut the meat on the pestle, you can no longer move the pestle. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel both agree that once you have cut meat on the pestle, you can no longer move it. No. What about the tzorech gufo? What if I want to use the pestle for, I don't know, some other permitted purpose? Sounds like everyone agrees that I wouldn't be able to move it. No, Rabbah, what happened to your opinion of kli shemalachto le'iser would be allowed to be moved, the tzorech gufo? That is Abaye's kasha. So Savar l'shanuye le'Rabbi Nechemiah. So this is very interesting. So Rabbah was thinking to answer initially the same way he answered the previous brisa about the previous question, which had to do with the mortar that had no garlic in it, which was to say, it's Rabbi Nechemiah's opinion. There are other opinions. So he wanted to say the same thing over here, that also Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai are saying in line with Rabbi Nechemiah, which is that kli shemalachto le'iser is only movable. Kalim in general, anything on Shabbos is only movable for a specific purpose, and this specific purpose would be something that's not allowed on Shabbos because it's a pestle. However, there's a better answer. Kevin the Shama lahada Amar Rav Chinina bar Shlamim mishmei derav. But once Rabbah heard of what Rav Chinina bar Shlamim said in the name of Rav, Hakol modim b'sichei zayare umazore. Oh, oops. I didn't get the official translations of these things, but even if I did, I'm not sure how much of a difference it would make. But the point is, and this is the part that makes a difference, is that these are tools that are used by a dyer. Okay? So these tools that are used by a dyer, Kevin de kapit alayu, this is the important part, friends, miyachilu makom. Hachi na, or haninami miyachilu makom. Friends, did you hear that? That when it comes to these kalim, these utensils, these vessels that are used by dyers, people who dye clothing with colors, so they're very makpid on the tools of their craft, of their trade. They can get broken, and therefore they put them away in a specific place, and they don't let anybody touch them. They only use them for when they're working, and for that reason, even Rabbah would admit that you wouldn't be able to use them at tzorech gufo, right? You just leave them there, you don't touch them. And he says, Hane namim yachilu makom. And he says that when it comes to mortar and pestle, it's the same thing. I don't know why. I don't know. I guess so. I mean, what do I know about mortars and pestles? So anyways, apparently, these mortars and pestles also, you would put away in a specific place and you would only use them for that which it's used for and nothing else. And for that reason, it's only movable, like even when Beis Hillel says that you'd be allowed to cut meat on it on Yom Tov, that's it. Once you're done with cutting the meat, you put it back away and you can't use it for anything else because it's something that you're makpid on and you specify a place for it. And therefore, things like that would not be able to be movable, litzorich gufo, litzorich makomo, any of these things. Okay. Itmar, it was stated, Reb Chia bar Abba, Reb Yochanan, it says Reb Chia bar Abba, in the name of Reb Yochanan, Kurnis shel zehavim shaninu. When the Mishnah says that you are permitted to use a hammer to crack a nut, and as Rabbah says, because it's the tzorich gufo, you can use this hammer, the tzorich gufo. So it's talking about the hammer of goldsmiths, that they have these hammers that they use in order to, bang the gold. You can even use that hammer to open up a nut. I guess you're not makbid enough, as Rashi says, because even if it kind of gets dented or something, you can always, as we learned the other day, you can always just bang it on the seden, bang it on this like anvil, and it'll just smooth it out, so it's really no big deal. You can use it for nuts on Shabbos. Reb Shem bar Abba Amar, Kurnis shel bisamim shaninu. Reb Shem bar Abba says that we're talking about you can even use a hammer that you use for spices, which is a very delicate hammer. You can even use that to open up nuts. Manda Amar de bisamim kolshken de zahavim. Reb Shem bar Abba, who says that you're allowed to use a hammer that you use for spices, certainly then you'd be able to use a hammer that you use for gold to open up nuts, because the hammer of spices is more delicate than the hammer used for gold. Therefore, if you're allowed to use the hammer for spices, certainly you'd be able to use the sturdier hammer that's used for gold. Aval man de amar shel zahavim aval de b'samim kapir alayu. However, Reb Chia bar Abba, in the name of Reb Yochanan, who says that you would be allowed to use a goldsmith's hammer. However, the bisamim hammer, the spices hammer, would be a little bit too delicate, and the owner of it would be makbid on it, and therefore we would not use it for opening nuts. Fine. Let's move on. Vesakush vesakarkar chulu, and you can use a winnowing no, wrong thing. A spindle and a weaver's reed, those things. A toothpick epis. So something that you could take and poke into something else and pull it out, right? So, for example, sometimes maybe you've seen that people use toothpicks to stick into like watermelon, and then they, and then they'll eat it, whatever. So that's what we're talking about here. Some kind of a pointy utensil that you can poke into something and pull it towards you. Fine. Taner Abanan, the rabbis taught, Paga shetamna b'teven v'charara shetamna b'gechalim. A unripe fig. If you have a fig that is not yet ripe and you want it to get ripe, so you cover it up in some straw and you wait. And when it's ripe, you'll take it out. So now it's ripe and it's Shabbos and you want to take it out of the straw, but the straw is muktza, so you can't move the straw. So that's the challenge. How do you remove the fig without moving the straw? Interesting challenge, right? Now we have a similar situation, but this one involves a pita. V'charara shetamna b'gechalim. You have a pita that before Shabbos you had covered it up in some coals, and now the coals are already extinguished, and it was, I guess, baking or whatever in those coals, getting nice and crisp, I guess. And now it's Shabbos, and you want to remove it from the coals. So, friends, what do? How do we get these figs and pitas? How do we get them out of the muktza stuff that they are surrounded, that they are covered in? Im migula miktsasa mutter taltula. Okay, so listen up, friends. This is interesting. So, if part of the pita or part of the fig is exposed, easy. Just grab on to the exposed part and pull. and you could pull out, let's say, the pita from the coals. Now, what will happen is that whatever coals were above the pita will now, gravity will pull them down into where the pita was. That's not our concern. You didn't move it, gravity moved it. That's acceptable. Everyone, right? Everyone seemingly would agree that there's no problem there. You're not moving anything. You're just pulling out what you want. You're pulling out the pita or the fig. And then if sort of gravity, causes the coals or the straw to move down into the place that the fig or the pita, I don't know if the word is consumed, but whatever the place where the pita or the fig was, so that's fine. You didn't do that. Gravity did. Okay. V'im lav asu l'tatla. However, if none of the fig or none of the pita is exposed, well, then you would be unable to remove it, because in order to get to it, you're going to have to move around the straw or the coals, and you can't do that. They're muktza, so then it's asur. Now listen to this, friends. Rabbi Eliezer ben Tadai says, Tochvin bechush o becharkar vehein mina aros me'eleihem. So Rabbi Eliezer ben Tadai suggests that you take some kind of a toothpick, something pokey, and you poke it into the fig or into the pita, and then you can pull out the fig or the pita like that. And even though the fig or the pita is going to get stuck on some coals or some straw, no big deal. It's tiltul min hatzad. And as Rashi defines tiltul min hatzad at the end of the Dibra Maschil, mimata lemala asur. It's about 3/4 of the way into Rashi. He says at the end of that Rashi, v'afagav de tiltul offer min hatzadhu she'eno ochzo mamish biyado. This is a little bit of a different case, but it's the same principle, which is that, even though you're going to be moving, in this case you're going to be moving straw, you're going to be moving coals, but the fact of the matter is, she'eno ochzo mamish biyado. It's not like you're taking this straw or these coals in your hand and moving them. No, you have a toothpick, you manage to, get it right into the fig or into the, probably a longer stick, got it into the fig or into the pita, and you're pulling now the stick, whatever straw or whatever coals might move in the process, you didn't move directly. Therefore, it's tiltul min hatzad, right? It's considered moving it from the side. And therefore, Rabbi Eliezer ben Tadai says that would be acceptable. You would be able to remove the pita or the fig in this manner. Right? So again, Rabbi Eliezer ben Tadai omer, tochvin bechush o becharkar vein menairos me'elem. You can, puncture the fig or the pita with this stick and pull it out of the pile, and whatever moves. It's not a big deal. Rav Nachman, halacha Rabbi Eliezer ben Tadai. Rav Nachman says that the halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer ben Tadai. Lemeimra desavar Rav Nachman tiltul min hatzad lo shmei tiltul. Is that to say that Rav Nachman's opinion is that moving something from the side, that tiltul min hatzad is not considered moving it, is not considered, a problem of moving muktza? Ve'amar Rav Nachman, but didn't Rav Nachman say, Hai pugla milamayla lemata shari, mimata lemayla asur? But didn't Rav Nachman say that when it comes to radishes, if you have a radish, you already harvested the radish, and as we saw the other day, the concept of taking the radish and then putting it in the ground just to cool it, to store it, and now it's Shabbos and you want to remove it from the ground. So Rav Nachman suggests, look, if the radish, is in the ground from top to bottom, i.e. the bottom of the radish, which is thinner, is in the ground, and the wider part is at the top, so basically you can pull out the radish without having to really move any dirt, well then you could pull it out. But Rav Nachman says if it was the other way around, if the wider part of the radish was in the earth and the thinner part was on top, and now you're going to pull the thinner part and then the thicker part is going to come out of the earth and move around the dirt, well, in that case, he says you would not be allowed to take out the radish because it's tiltul min hatzad. So I don't understand. On the one hand, in the context of the radish, Rav Nachman seems to be concerned with tiltul min hatzad. When it comes to the fig and when it comes to the pita bread, he's passing like Rabbi Eliezer ben Tadai and saying that pull it out using this, pokey stick, and it's not tiltul min. He's not concerned about tiltul min hatzad. Hadavar Rav Nachman me'ahi. So the Gemara says, yeah, that was old Rav Nachman. New Rav Nachman doesn't hold to that. Meaning, when Rav Nachman said that you would be, you would only be able to pull out a radish from the ground when the top part of the radish is on top and the bottom part of the radish is on the bottom, so that it won't move the earth. He doesn't agree with that anymore. Now, he would say you can even pull out the radish if it was upside down and you're going to have to move earth. It's fine because it's tiltul min hatzad, and that would be acceptable, like Rabbi Eliezer ben Tadoi. Very interesting. Machat shel yad litoba chule. So the Mishnah says that you may take a regular needle in order to remove a splinter. Shalach le Rava bre de Rabba, the Rav Yosef. So Rava, the son of Rabba, sent to Rav Yosef. Okay. Yilamdenu Rabbeinu, teach us, our rabbi. Machat shenito charara o uktzah mau. What if you have a needle that the hole of the needle or the point of the needle were removed? Can I move this on Shabbos? Is it considered muktza or is it considered muchan? So Rav Yosef says, look, lemaisa, it's our Mishnah. You're allowed to move a needle if it is to remove a splinter. The splinter doesn't care if the needle has a hole in it or if the needle doesn't have a hole in it, if the needle has a point in it or the needle doesn't have a point in it. As long as you can remove a splinter with this needle, so you can move it on Shabbos. Eisvei. Rava bre de Rabba then asks Akasha and Rav Yosef, and he says, Machat shenito charara o uktzah tahora. There's a Mishnah in Kalim that says that if you have a needle that the hole or the point was removed, tahora, it's no longer makabel tumah. So doesn't that sound like when the needle loses its hole or its point, it's no longer a kli, and therefore, and that's why it's tahor, and therefore on Shabbos you shouldn't be able to move it if it's not a kli. Amar Abaye. So Abaye comes to the defense of his Rebbe, Rav Yosef, who says that you nonetheless would be able to move this needle since it's to remove a splinter. Tuma Shabbos karamis. Are you seriously asking a kasha on Shabbos from Tuma? To say that since it's not a kli legabe Tuma, therefore it's not a kli legabe Shabbos? Tuma kli maise ba'inon, linyan Shabbos midi dechazi ba'inon, v'ana michazia, lemishkala bakotz. Abaye says you can't compare Tuma and Shabbos. The definition of a kli in the context of Tuma is different than the definition of a kli in the context of Shabbos. Tuma kli maisa ba'inan. I'm repeating, right? So when it comes to Tuma, the pasuk says kli maisa. It needs to be a kli that is in the state that it's normally used for work, and therefore, since when it comes to Tuma, it needs to be in the state that it's normally used for work. When you have a needle that the hole or the point was removed for it, it's not in the context, it's not in the, state in which it's normally used for work, and therefore it's tahor, it's no longer a kli, it's no longer makabel tuma once it loses its hole or its point. The Inyan Shabbos, however, midi dechazi ba'inan. We're not concerned about is it technically in its, regular state that you use it for doing work. What's important rather is if you can use it functionally to remove a splinter. And the answer to this question is yes. This needle that it has lost its hole in it, or that it's lost its point on it, you can still remove a splinter with it, and therefore you could still move it on Shabbos, even if in the context of Tumah, it wouldn't be considered a Kli. Amar Rava. Rava responds to Abaye, Man de kamosiv, shapir kamosiv. He says, hey, Abaye, Rava bre de Rabba's kasha was a good kasha. Midil inyan tuma lav manahu, then in Shabbos nami lav manahu. Rather, says Rava, what Rava bre de Rabba asked was a good kasha. That since, as Rava bre de Rabba brought from the Mishnah in Kalim, since if it loses its hole or its point, it's no longer a kli in terms of tuma, and it's going to be tahor. Guess what, friends? The same applies to Shabbos. It will not be a kli for Shabbos, and you won't be able to move it. Eisvei, meisvei. We have a kasha on Rava though. Machad ben nekuva ben she'ena nekuva mutar l'taltalav v'Shabbos. That if you have a needle, whether it has a hole in it, whether it doesn't have a hole in it, you can move it on Shabbos. V'lo amru nekuva l'inyan tuma bilvad. And the Brisa continues and says, oh, by the way, when do we say that having a hole in it is significant, makes a difference? In the context of Tumah, that's it. Shabbos is a different thing. And even though this needle that doesn't have a hole in it, with regard to Tumah, it would not be Makabel Tumah. Regarding Shabbos, you would be able to move it to remove a splinter. Wow. So that seems to be pretty clear that it's not like Rava. Rava said that we equate Tumah and Shabbos. And since a needle without a hole will not be Tameh, therefore it also won't be a Kli on Shabbos and you can't move it. But we have this Brisa that says the opposite. It says a needle without a hole, you can move on Shabbos, even though it will not be Makabel Tumah, because Tumah and Shabbos are different. Tirgama Abaye, Aliba de Rava. Abaye stands up for his contemporary Rava, and he says, even though I disagree with Rava, and even though I say, like my Rebbe Rav Yosef, that a needle that doesn't have a hole and doesn't have a point, you can still move on Shabbos because you can remove a splinter with it. Nonetheless, I'm going to stand up for Rava, and I will show how this Brisa that says that this needle that doesn't have a hole in it, you can move it on Shabbos, even though it's not Makabel Tumah. It can even make sense according to Rava, who wants to say that if you can't move, if it's not Makabel Tumah, you also won't be able to move it on Shabbos. Tirgama Abaye, Aliba de Rava, Bigolmi Askinan. This Brisa that says that a needle that doesn't have a hole will not be Makabel Tumah, but you can move it on Shabbos, that's Begolme. That is talking about a needle that is not yet complete. It's still sort of in its raw material. It doesn't yet have a hole in it. And in that case, meaning it's not talking about a needle that broke. No. It's talking about a needle that hasn't yet been completed yet. So it's pointy, but it doesn't yet have a hole. In that case, that's where the Brisa says that you'll be allowed to move it on Shabbos, because at the end of the day you can remove a needle with it, but you can remove a splinter with it, but with Legabe Tumah, it would not yet be Makabel Tumah, since it's not yet complete, it's not yet fully a Kli. Says the Gemara, Zimnin de Mimlach alayu umashvelu umana. Sometimes you might change your mind and say, you know what, I'm just going to leave it as it is, I can use it to remove splinters. And because of that, since, it's already functional to be able to remove splinters, so therefore you can move it on Shabbos. But with regard to Tumah, it's not yet a complete Kli until it has a hole in it, so it's not yet Makabel Tumah. That is what that Brisa is talking about. However, Rava would say, what does it say? Aval heicha denita al charara o ukta adam zorka levein grotos. However, Rava would argue that if it was already a complete needle, but the hole or the point fell off, well, at that point, it wouldn't be Makabel Tumah, and it also would not be movable on Shabbos. Abaye and Rav Yosef, of course, argue and say that you would be able to move it on Shabbos because you can still use it to remove a splinter. Says the Gemara, Asuve Yenuka, setting the limbs of a little guy that was just born. So you have a little guy, he was just born, and I guess his bones and stuff are still a little loose. I mean, I don't know much about this, but I guess the people who are there when he's born then will set his bones into place so that he's good to go into the world. Rav Nachman also Rav Sheshes Shari. Rav Nachman says that you're not allowed to do this. Rav Sheshes says that you are allowed to do this. Amr Rav Nachman, Mina Minala. Rav Nachman says, from where do I establish my opinion that I say that you would not be allowed to set these bones in place? The Tananas, we learn in the Mishnah, in Osin apik devizim b'Shabbos. You're not allowed to make barf elixirs on Shabbos. Yeah, you heard that right. Barf elixirs. Yeah, I guess that they would drink stuff to barf. You can't do it on Shabbos. I guess it was considered healthy or something. Like if you're going to a big meal and you didn't want to be all full before you got there, so just drink this thing, puke, and then go to the meal. So you can't do it on Shabbos because it's considered like misakin. It's not refuah, but it's misakin. And here also you're being misakin the little guy. Rav Sheshes, Hasam lav orche acha orche. Rav Sheshes says, yeah, but that's not necessarily like an orche. It's not like a normal thing. Like you don't just drink barf elixirs all the time. But when it comes to this baby, like it's just like a normal thing that you have to do for babies, just like eating and drinking also you gotta fix, you gotta set the limbs in place, and therefore it would be acceptable. Amr of Sheshes, Muna Aminallah. Rav Sheshes says, and where do I base my opinion that it would be mutter from? The Tananas, we learn in the Mishnah, Machat Shoyad Lito Ba'asakotz. Well, the Mishnah says that you would be able to use a needle to remove a splinter, right? Meaning, even though refuah on Shabbos is a problem, I wouldn't be able to take medicine on Shabbos because we have to worry about shchika samanim, but that's not an issue when it comes to removing a splinter, and therefore since a splinter is like an external item, that it's like a foreign object in your skin, you could remove it. It's not like you're taking medicine, it's not refuah, and that's acceptable. So then also, here also you can set the limbs. You're not ingesting any kind of a medicine, you're just, fixing up the little guy. Whereas Rashi says, Lito ba'asakotz, you can remove a splinter, Alma, takune gavra b'midi delav l'refuah, delekam shum shchika samanan shari. That fixing up a person, as long as it's not like, what does it say? B'midi delav l'refuah, that if it's not for refuah, and we're defining refuah as something that you might have to grind up spices, ingest some kind of a medicine, so as long as it's not that, it would be permitted according to Rav Sheshes. So setting the bones is fine. It's not, it's tikkun gavra, but it's not refuah. Rav Nachman Hasam Pakid Achalo Pakid says no. The splinter is right. Hasam Pakid Achalo Pakid. Over there by the splinter, it is, says Rashi, Pakid Akotza Zeh Enu Mechuber Bo Ela Mufkad V'Nasun Sham V'Tzazo Ena Tikkun Hachalo Pakid. That when it comes to the thorn, the splinter isn't part of him, right? It's just like kind of like externally put over there, and therefore you can remove it. Over here, it's part of his body, and therefore it's considered like a type of tikkun, and it would be a problem. Okay, fine, very good. That's Machlokes in Rav Nachman, Rav Sheshes. Weiter says the Mishnah, Kanesh Shel Zeisim. If you have a reed that you use to move around olives, basically what they would do is they would harvest their olives. After they would harvest their olives, they would put it in some kind of a vat. And they would let the olives sit in the vat and soften until all the oil is ready to come out, and then they would press them and get olive oil. So what they would do is during this process, how would they know when the olives are ready? So they have these sticks, these like bamboo sticks. And I think is bamboo hollow in the middle? Let's say yes. So they would have these bamboo reeds, and they would use them to move around the olives, and that way they would be able to have a look at the olives and see if they are ready yet. Okay. So it says the Mishnah, Kana shel zeisim. So this hollow reed that they would use to move around the olives in the vat to be able to check and see how they're doing, if they're ready for pressing. Im yesh kesher b'rosh makabel tuma v'mlav makabel tuma. So if there is a knot at the end, so then it will be makabel tuma. If not, then it's not makabel tuma. So now this knot at the end is some kind of like thing that they would like stick into the end of it, almost like on wine bottles on the bottom. There's like that place where you can like stick your thumb in, Kayla, where it like goes up a bit and like can get a finger in there. So here also on this reed. So if they kind of like closed it up with some kind of receptacle, so then it will be makabel tuma. Okay. Now, ve'imlav ein makabel tuma. If it doesn't have this like plug in it, well then it's not makabel tuma. Benkach uvenkach nito b'Shabbos. Whether it has this plug, whether it doesn't have this plug, you may move it on Shabbos because it's a kli, so you can move it. Says the Gemara, Amai, how come this reed that has a plug in it should be makabel tuma? Pshute kle'etzu. At the end of the day, it's pshute klei eitz, and as we all know, of course, pshute klei eitz ain't makabel tuma. We know, of course, that pshute klei eitz, a piece of wood that does not have a receptacle in it, is not makabel tuma. Just a straight piece of wood is not makabel tuma. So therefore, why should this reed be makabel tuma, even if it has a plug in it? Right? My time. How come pshute klei eitz are not makabel tuma? Do me the sak ba'inan. Because in the pasuk it says kli eitz o sak, right, o beged o sak. We compare wooden utensils to a sack, just like a sack obviously has a place to a receptacle to put things in. So therefore, also a wood would only be makabel tuma if it has a receptacle, like a spoon or something. So he says, you know why? Because when this plug, as I was saying, like in a bottle of wine, it has some kind of receptacle in it. And therefore what happens is when you take this reed and you're moving around the olives, you're then going to take out the reed and you're going to look in the receptacle to see if there's any oil in there. And I guess based on either the quality of the oil or even just the existence of the oil, it will indicate to him whether or not these olives are ready. So therefore it really, for pressing, therefore it really is not pshute klei eitz. It has a receptacle and you use that receptacle to check if the olives are ready for pressing. And that is why when there's a plug in this reed, it will be makabel tuma. New Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi Omer kol hakelim nitalin chutz min hameser hagadol v'yosed shel machresha. Says Rabbi Yossi that all vessels are able to be moved on Shabbos. If it's a kli, if it's a vessel, you can move it on Shabbos. 3 exceptions. Scratch that. 2 exceptions. Chutz min hameser hagadol, except for a big saw that you use to like saw big beams. V'yosed shel machresha, and the I wrote it down. Did I write it down? I did. A coulter. And that's what I was saying before, by the way, friends. Come on, who knows what a coulter is? Be honest. Come on. I know, nobody knows. I know, I had to look it up too. Not only did I look it up, I watched a YouTube video about it. Very interesting. 2 YouTube videos, actually. One about it and one watching it. Very, very interesting stuff, guys. But anyways, that's why I remember I said before by the dyer's cleats, I said, I forgot to look up what these are, but it probably wouldn't make a difference anyways. That's what I meant. Come on, who knows what a coulter is? If you know what a coulter is, so then feel free to let us know on WhatsApp, and we'll all be very proud of you. Okay? Great. But now, for those of you like me, just 2 hours ago, who don't know what a coulter is, I don't really know how to explain it, sorry. But it's part of like a plow. Like basically you would plow a field, and then when you would plow, it would kind of like pick up the soil, and then this thing it's like a blade that cuts the earth so that it's easier to then plow. So like it goes right before like the plow blades, the plowshare, and then it breaks up the earth. It's like a slicer, like a round saw kind of like a disc, and it cuts up the earth, and then it makes it easier to plow. Very interesting. Well, yeah. So a big saw and a coulter. So you don't move those. So those things cannot be moved on Shabbos. And as Rashi says in the Rashi Diramascha v'yased shamachresha dehanach kapid alayu umyachid lohem makom, as we saw earlier, because these tools you're makpid on them, and therefore you specify a place where you put them to lo chazum lech acheres. You can't use them for anything else. They're used for one thing, and that's their purpose. And you put them away on Shabbos, and you don't use them. Amr of Nachman says of Nachman, hay uchla de katsare. Who could tell me what those are? Launderer's riddles. What the heck is a launderer's riddle? I don't know, some kind of like thing that a launderer uses. There's like different opinions. So I guess like nobody really knows what it is, but I don't know. So either some way to like put hot water on stuff, or like some way to like get incense to get on the clothing. Fine. So we say that this what do we call it? A launderer's riddle. So is like kiyase chamachresha dami. It is like the coulter of the plow, because since the launderers are very makpid on this tool of theirs, so therefore it's only as a specific purpose, and it's not movable on Shabbos. Amr Abaye, charva de ushkefe, a tanner's knife, like people who work with hides. V'sakina de ashkevasa, and a butcher's knife. Sounds scary. V'chatzina de nagare, and a carpenter's adze. What the heck is an adze? I don't know. Kiyase chamachresha dami are also like the coulter of a plow, and therefore they're not able to be used again, because these are specific tools of craftsmen, and they don't use them for other things. They put them away, and that is that. Okay. This is interesting. Taner Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Barishona ayu omrim. Originally, they would say, Shlosha kelim nitalim b'Shabbos. There are only 3 vessels that can be moved on Shabbos, nothing else. Wow, imagine what Shabbos must have been like back then. Muktza shel dvela, that is a knife that you would use to cut up these fig cakes. V'zuama listaran shel kidera, some kind of a ladle that you would use to remove the foam from a pot. v'sakin katana shel gabi shulchan, and a small knife that's on the table. Now, Barishona, when it says initially, it means during the days of Nehemiah, right? As we're gonna see a pasuk later on that during the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, Nehemiah saw that Shabbos was not looking very Shabbos-tic, and people were using all sorts of things, and therefore that's when he enacted muktza, which is extremely interesting. Meaning, until the second Beis Hamikdash, it sounds like there was no concept of muktza. Up until the second, throughout the entire first Beis Hamikdash, throughout the entire time, whatever, in the desert, in Eretz Yisrael, Yoshua, the Shoftim, everything, muktza was like not a thing on Shabbos. Only in the second Beis Hamikdash was this, Nehemiah introduced this concept of muktza because he realized that people were like being very un-Shabbos-tic. I'll read you this pasuk that we're going to quote later on. It's from Nehemiah. It says, "Bayavim ahem." In those days, Ra'isi b'Yehuda dorchim gitos b'Shabbos. I saw people were like trampling in their wine vats on Shabbos. Umivim ha'aremos, and then they would bring the piles. V'omsim al chamorim, and on Shabbos they would be taking like this stuff and putting it on their donkeys. V'af yayin anavim, right, and wine, use'enim, and figs. V'chomasa, umivim Yerushalayim b'yom ha'Shabbos, and they would bring it to Jerusalem on Shabbos. V'ayid b'yom michram tzayid, and I guess that they also saw, I don't know, some kind of what, like, I don't know if it's talking about like what are those things called, like accessories or whatever, or trappings, I don't know. But the point is that on Shabbos they were doing all sorts of stuff that they weren't supposed to. I don't know if all these things would necessarily be considered muktza, or just because I guess maybe you need to take a stance and be like, hey, people, this is Shabbos, this is different than all the other days. And that's when he introduced muktza, and there are certain things you can touch, move, certain things you can't move, etc. So at the beginning, muktza was very hardcore. It was very strict. There were literally only 3 things that you can move on Shabbos. And that was a knife for cutting fig cakes, a ladle for removing foam from a pot, and a table knife. That's it. And then, slowly, hitiru, v'chazu, then they made one thing mutter, then they made another thing mutter, and they made even more mutter, until they finally said that all of the vessels may be moved on Shabbos, and instead of saying only 3 things were allowed, they then said chutz min meser agad v'yasad shamach reisha, the only 2 things that are not allowed. So they blacklisted rather than whitelisted. They said that there are 2 things that are still not allowed, and that is the large saw and the coulter of a plow. Okay, so at the beginning there were literally only 3 things that were allowed to be moved. Then slowly they allowed more and more until it got to the point where basically everything was movable, with 2 exceptions: the large saw and the coulter of the plow. What does it mean that, so initially everything was essentially aser, and then they allowed a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more? What does that mean? Amar Abaye, hitiru davar shemlachtu leheter l'tzorech gufo. So in stage number 1, they permitted anything shemelachto leheter l'tzorech gufo. So let's say you have a fork, and I guess that you're allowed to use a fork on Shabbos, but you want to use it as a back scratcher. So it's a davar shemelachto leheter, but normally you use it for eating. But now you want to use it as a back scratcher. So in stage 1, that was allowed. You're allowed to use utensils that are mutter to use on Shabbos, right? And you can use it for some other purpose on Shabbos that is permissible. And then in the next stage they said, you know what? You can now even move a fork if it's just in your way. I don't know, if you want to put down a book on the table and there's a fork there, you can move the fork out of the way. In stage 1 that wasn't allowed. It was only allowed machmas gufo. If you needed to scratch your back, then you can pick it up and scratch your back. But if you just want to move it out of the way because you want to put down your book, that wouldn't be allowed. In stage 2, Abaye says, now they allowed kli shemelachto leheter, even the tzorech makomo, if you want to move it, out of the way so you could put something there. V'chazu v'tiru, and then in stage 3, they permitted davar shemelachto le'iser, the tzorech gufo, in the tzorech makomo lo. And they said in stage 3, that now you can even use a davar shemelachto le'iser, such as a blacksmith's hammer, the tzorech gufo. If you want to use it to open a nut, that is permitted. In stage 3, they permitted kli shemelachto le'iser letzorech gufo. However, letzorech makomo lo, you still, if you had a blacksmith's hammer on the table, you would not be able to move it out of the way because you want to put down a book. That would not work. Ve'adayin biyado achas in b'shtei yadav lo, But even so, at this point, you were only still allowed to move things that you can move with one hand, right? So these kli shemalachto leheter bein legufo bein letzorech makomo, and kli shemalachto leiser, when we said that you can move it letzorech gufo, these things that you're allowed to move, you're only allowed to move it if they were the size that you can move it with one hand. But if they're only movable with two hands, lo. Until they finally said, Kol ha-kelim nitalim b'Shabbos, you can move all of these kelim that we said that you're allowed to move, right? Kli shemalachto le'iser, bein letzorech, no, kli shemalachto leheter, bein letzorech gufo, bein letzorech makomo, and kli shemalachto le'iser, letzorech gufo, these things you can even move, whether it's with one hand, whether it's with two hands. Amalei Abaye, no. Amalei Rava, so Rava says to Abaye, Michdei, 1 second, let's see. Hitiru katani, mali letzorech gufo, mali letzorech makomo. Rava says, what do you mean? It says that they allowed, right? It says hitiru, v'chazu v'tiru, they allowed. If they're allowing, why do I care if it's letzorech gufo, letzorech makomo? If they allowed it, they allowed it. So Ela Amar Rava, hitiru davar shemalachto leheter, bein letzorech gufo, bein letzorech makomo. In stage 1, they allowed a kli shemalachto leheter, whether it's letzorech gufo, whether it's tzorech makomo. In stage 1, they said you can use a fork, you can move a fork, whether it's because you want to scratch your back, or whether it's because it's in a place where you want to put down your book. Either way, you can move it out of the way. You can move it. V'chazu v'tiru mechama litzel. In stage 2, they said, you can even move this fork if it's in the sun and you're scared that it's going to get sun damage, so you don't need it now. You're not scratching your back. You don't need the place where it is. You want to preserve it for later so that it doesn't get ruined. So in stage 2, they said that would be permitted by a fork, by a kli shemalachto leheter. V'chazu v'tiru, and then in stage 3, v'tiru davar shemalachto leiser letzorech gufo letzorech makomo. And then in stage 3, they said a kli shemalachto leiser, such as a blacksmith's hammer, is movable on Shabbos, whether it is to crack a nut, letzorech gufo, or whether it's because it's where you want to put down a book, so you want to get it out of the way. That would be acceptable. Right, and we say that for this purpose, in mecham litzel lo, however, you would not be able to move a kli shemalachto leiser just because it's in the sun and you're scared it's going to get ruined. For that, you would not be allowed to move it, right? So a kli shemalachto leiser, you would be allowed to move, whether it's because you want to crack a nut or whether because it's in your way and you want to put down your book where it is. But you would not be able to just move it out of the sun, for later. That would not be allowed. Ve'adayin ba'adam echad in b'shnei bnei adam lo, but still, you would only be able to move things that you can move with one person, but if it's so big that you need two people to move it, you would not be allowed to move it on Shabbos. Until they then said, no, actually all kelim can be moved on Shabbos, even if it takes two people to carry them. Very nice. Abaye asks Akasha to Rava, and I'm sure it's going to sound very familiar to everybody here, because it's the same two kashas that he asked on Rava earlier. So Abaye asked the kasha on Rava. What's his kasha? Midda'ocha. Remember the mortar in the beginning of the daf. Im yesh ba shum mitaltlen osa, vim la mitaltlen osa. If the mortar has garlic in it, well then you can move it. If the mortar does not have garlic in it, you cannot move it. So Abaye says, according to me, all good. Abaye says, according to me, the mortar is a kli shemalachto leiser. And why are you not allowed to move it? Letzorech makomo, you're not allowed to move it. Right? Abaye admits that letzorech gufo, right? He says in stage 3, they permitted kli shemalachto leiser letzorech gufo, you can move it. However, they never permitted kli shemalachto leiser letzorech makomo, according to Abaye. And therefore Abaye says this brisa that says that you're not allowed to move a mortar that is empty. He says, I get it. Letzorech makomo, you're not allowed to move it. But according to Rava, who says that kli shemalachto leiser in stage 3, they permitted to move the tzorech gufo and the tzorech makomo. Well then why should I ever not be allowed to move a mortar? Easy. Rava says, well, they never allowed you to move a kli shemalachto leiser from the sun into the shade. That is what that brisa is talking about. If it doesn't have garlic in it, you can't move it from the sun to the shade. Eisvei. Abaye now asks question number 2 that he had asked Rabba earlier. He's now asking it to Rava. That Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that this pestle you're allowed to use to cut meat on Yom Tif. But once you've cut the meat on Yom Tif, you can no longer move it. So Abaye says, I get it. You can't move it l'tzorech mekomo, but you can move it l'tzorech gufo. Hachanami mecham l'tzel. Rava also answers that is from the sun into the shade. Amr Reb Chanina, says Reb Chanina, B'mei Nechemya ben Chachalya nishnes mishnah zo, that this brisa that we're talking about first everything was usher except for 3 things, and then slowly they permitted more things. That brisa is from the days of Nechemya ben Chachalya. Tichsiv, as the pasuk says, Bayom Mahema, in those days, Ra'isi b'Yehuda, I saw in Judah, Dorchim Gitos b'Shabbos, people were trampling on their grape presses on Shabbos, on the grapes on Shabbos, Umivim Ha'aremos, and they were bringing bundles of wheat, etc. And therefore, Nehemiah said, look, I have to do something about it. And he said, people, everyone, stop, everything's muktza for now. And then slowly they allowed more things to make sure that Shabbos would remain Shabbos. Friends, that was Daf Kuf Chav Gimel of Masechta Shabbos. It was a great daf, right? I think so. It was a little bit, you had to pay attention, but I think at this point we're used to paying attention. Masechta Shabbos requires our attention. Let us review the page. At the beginning, we talked about moving a mortar and a pestle that doesn't have anything in it. And essentially, we said that the reason why you would not be able to move it, and we said at the beginning the reason why you would not be able to move it is because it is so valuable. The people are very makpid on it. And they put it away in a specific place, and they don't use it except for what it's supposed to be used for. And therefore, we do not move it on Shabbos, according to Rabbah, who says that Kli Shemachto le'Isser is movable l'tzarech gufo. Nonetheless, you would not move because you're very makpid on it. Okay? Fine. We talked about if you have a fig. By the way, I don't know how that would necessarily tie in with Abaye and Rava, who explained that you can move this mortar for different reasons. Abaye he says that you can't move it if it's tzarech mikomo, but you would be able to move it l'tzarech gufo. Rava says you would be able to move it l'tzarech gufo and l'tzarech mikomo, but not mecham l'tzel. So I don't know. I guess different ways of understanding this mortar. We talked about removing figs from straw and pitas from coals, which is interesting because we introduced the concept of tiltul min hatzad, which seems to be okay. So Tanakama says that if the fig or the pita is sticking out, you can pull it, and then whatever gravity brings down is okay. You didn't move it. Rabbi Eliezer ben Tadai says you can even poke it with like a toothpick kind of thing, like a stick, and then pull it out that way, and you're not pulling on the straw or the coals directly. Therefore, it's tiltul min hatzad, and that seems to be acceptable. And Rav Nachman says the halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer ben Tadai. Moving a broken needle on Shabbos. Right, if you have a needle, right, the Mishnah says you can move a needle on Shabbos to remove a splinter. But what if the hole or the point fell off of the needle? Can you still move it on Shabbos? Rav Yosef and Abaye says, sure, you can move it because you can still remove a splinter with it. Rava says, no, since it's not makabel tumah anymore, it's also not going to be movable on Shabbos. Setting baby bones into place. So Rav Nachman says it's usher. Rav Shesha says it's mutter. Then at the end, we had this interesting thing with Nehemiah that at the beginning, all items were unable to be moved on Shabbos, except for like certain kinds of knives. And then slowly in 4 stages, they then permitted to move more things. Abaye says stage 1 permitted Kli Shemalachto leheter to be moved l'tzarech gufo. In stage number 2, they allowed Kli Shemalachto leheter to be moved l'tzarech mekomo. And in stage number 3, they allowed Kli Shemalachto Right, in the first 2 is Kli Shemalachto leheter. In stage 3, they allowed Kli Shemalachto le'isser to be moved l'tzarech gufo. And then at the end, they said all the kalim could be moved. That includes even kalim that are movable with, only movable with 2 hands. Rava says that in stage 1, they allowed all Kli Shemalachto leheter, bein legufo, bein l'tzarech mekomo. In step 2, they allowed Kli Shemalachto leheter to be moved from the sun to the shade. And in stage 3, they allowed all Kli Shemalachto le'issers to be moved bein l'tzarech gufo, bein l'tzarech mekomo, but still you cannot move something from the sun to the shade if it's Kli Shemalachto le'isser. And when they then allowed all the kalim, it's even things that require 2 people to move them. Friends, that was Daf Kuf Chav Gimel of Masechta Shabbos. I hope, of course, that you enjoyed that daf. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your day or night or whatever. Enjoy your life. Peace.